In the winter of 1888, the mining town of Glen Hollow stood silent beneath a ceiling of gray clouds. Snow covered the streets, soft and pure, hiding the filth that lived beneath. The air was heavy with the smell of coal smoke and fear. It began with a laugh. The first man to die was a miner named Samuel Greaves. He collapsed in the middle of Main Street, shaking with uncontrollable laughter. People ran to him, but his laughter only grew louder until his ribs cracked. He died with a wide grin frozen on his face. The snow around his body was stained with blood that looked black in the cold light. Within a week, 5 more were dead. They all died laughing. The town's doctor, Edward Howard, wrote in his journal that it must be a sickness of the lungs. He called it a nervous fever, but when he opened the first body, he found no sign of infection, no poison, no fungus. The brain tissue was strange. Parts of it were scarred and bright, as if it had been burned from inside by joy and terror at once. He closed the man's skull and washed his hands. The scent of formaldehyde couldn't drown the memory of that grin. By the second week, laughter echoed through the town at night. It came from the houses, from the mines, sometimes from the empty church. People locked their doors, yet they heard it beneath their floors. No one slept. Dr. Howard began to suspect something beyond medicine. He visited the old priest, Father Alden, who hadn't left the chapel in months. The priest's hands shook as he told him a story. 15 years ago, in 1873, a section of the mine collapsed. 37 men were buried alive. The company that owned the mine sealed the tunnels and paid the town to forget. They said the dead were untraceable, their names erased from records. But every winter, when the snow pressed heavy over the earth, the ground shifted and whispered. Now, the priest said, they were laughing. Howard didn't believe in curses, but when he walked home that night, he heard it too. A faint, choking laughter that came from beneath his boots. He started digging through old ledgers, hospital notes, mining rosters. Every record had been altered. The men who had died in 1873 had never officially existed, but someone had signed the falsified death certificates. The signature was clear. It belonged to the town's former mayor, who now lived on the edge of the woods, senile and half-blind. Howard went to see him. The old man sat by a fire, his eyes empty. He spoke without being asked. "We buried them alive," he said. "We heard them scream." The laughter started when the screaming stopped. The doctor left without a word. That night he dreamed of the mine. In the dream, the tunnels pulsed like lungs, and from every crevice came laughter, thousands of overlapping voices. When he woke, the sound was still there, faint but real. By morning, the contagion had spread. Not a disease, but a madness. Housewives laughed as they burned their furniture. Children giggled in their sleep and didn't wake again. Men gathered at the tavern, shouting jokes that made no sense until one by one they fell to the floor, twitching, faces twisted in mirth. Howard tried to flee the town, but the roads were blocked by snow. The telegraph lines had fallen. Glen Hollow was sealed by silence and laughter. He went to the mine. He had to see it himself. The entrance was boarded, but the boards were old and soft. When he broke them open, a wave of stale air rushed out, thick with the smell of rot and damp earth. He stepped inside, lantern trembling in his hand. The tunnels were narrow, their walls glistening with ice. As he moved deeper, he heard whispers. At first they sounded like the wind, but soon he realized they were words. The laughter returned, distant but rising. He followed it. His lantern flickered. The deeper he went, the more the air pulsed like breath. Then he saw the carvings, handprints pressed into the rock as if made by the dying men. Each one bore marks of nails clawing through stone. Beneath them, etched by trembling hands, a single phrase, "We are still here." Howard fell to his knees. The laughter surrounded him now, coming from every direction. The light of his lantern broke. Darkness swallowed him. In that darkness, something touched his face. Cold fingers brushed his lips. A voice spoke near his ear, breathless, joyful. "Doctor, you came back." He tried to run, but the ground shifted. The tunnel walls closed in, pressing against him. The laughter grew into a single, deafening sound. He saw shapes in the dark, faces half-rotted, mouths open in eternal grins. He screamed, but his scream turned into a laugh. The next morning, miners found his lantern lying near the entrance. The flame was still burning. His journal was open beside it. The last words written inside were uneven, almost carved into the paper. "It isn't sickness, it's memory." After that, the snow fell heavier. The town went silent again. Those who passed through Glen Hollow years later said they could still hear faint laughter under the ground when the wind blew from the north. They said it sounded like joy, but it wasn't. It was guilt that had learned to laugh. 2 days after Dr. Howard vanished, Glen Hollow lay quiet beneath a sky the color of ash. The snow had stopped, but the air no longer moved. Houses stood like empty shells, windows frosted from the inside. No one dared to speak. No one dared to laugh, but the laughter hadn't gone. It lingered in the walls, in the cracks of the mine, in the hollow of every heart that still beat. Mary Davis, the town's nurse, was one of the last left alive. Her hands trembled as she wrote in the doctor's journal she found near the mine. The ink froze on the page. She wrote that the laughter came not from mouths, but from the ground itself, breathing through the soil. She couldn't hear silence anymore, only the echo of what once was human. That night she saw a figure walking down Main Street. Through the mist, she thought it was Dr. Howard. He was barefoot, covered in dust, his eyes black with sleep. His lips were cut from smiling too long. He didn't speak. He only laughed, soft and broken, and pointed toward the mine. Mary followed him. Inside, the air was thick with warmth, though snow fell outside. The deeper she went, the stronger the sound became. It was no longer laughter now, but something between crying and singing. The walls seemed to pulse like veins. She saw the carvings again, but new ones had appeared since the doctor's last visit. 37 names glowed faintly under her lantern light, and one more, freshly scratched, Edward Howard. She whispered his name, but the tunnel answered her in dozens of voices. Each one said it differently, with affection, with hatred, with madness. At the end of the tunnel she found a small cavern. A wooden door stood there half buried in dirt. It was old, sealed with iron nails. She pressed her ear against it. The laughter stopped. Then, slowly, she heard whispers, low, desperate, rhythmic, like a prayer. She pulled the nails out with her hands. Blood ran down her fingers. When the door opened, the stench of death rushed out, but beneath it was another smell, faint and metallic, like iron dust mixed with breath. The cavern beyond was full of skeletons, their skulls all turned upward, mouths open in silent laughter. Between them, something moved. It was not human. It was shaped from bones and old clothes, stitched together by time. When it lifted its head, she saw the doctor's face inside the skulls, smiling, his eyes alive. He spoke in a voice that was more than one. "We are not cursed. We are remembered." Mary fell to her knees. She saw then that the laughter was not haunting them. It was feeding on them. It lived on guilt, on memory, on truth buried alive. The walls began to shake. Dust fell like rain. The laughter swelled again, echoing until it no longer sounded human. She ran, but the tunnels were closing. Every step forward brought her deeper instead of out. She screamed his name, and 100 voices answered. "Stay, stay, and laugh with us." When rescuers came 3 days later, they found the tunnels caved in. They found no bodies, only the doctor's lantern, burned out at last, and a set of footprints that led in a circle. In spring, when the snow melted, the town tried to return to life. New miners came. New families built homes. But the ground was never silent. The children sometimes woke at night, giggling in their sleep. The mothers said it was dreams. The old priest said it was the past remembering itself. By 1890, Glen Hollow was abandoned. The government sealed the mine and marked it unsafe. But travelers passing through still claimed that on quiet nights they could hear laughter drifting through the valley. It wasn't loud, it wasn't joyful, it was soft, constant, and endless. When the wind carried it, it sounded like dozens of voices telling the same secret, over and over, until the earth itself began to smile. And then, just before the echo faded, came a whisper that froze every listener's heart. It was never a disease. It was a confession.